أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Brothers and sisters, friends of Salam Media and this particular broadcast, a conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I apologize for the delay. We are now ready to go. We want to welcome our friends and guests in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I am pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. And with that said, I want to introduce our special guest for this afternoon's broadcast, this evening's broadcast in South Africa. Imam Zaid Shakir was born in Berkeley, California in 1956. From 1976 until 1981, he served in the United States Air Force, during which time he accepted Islam in 1977. He obtained a bachelor's degree with honors in international relations at American University in Washington, D.C. In 1983, and earned his master's in political science from Rutgers University in 1986. While at Rutgers, he led a campaign that culminated in the university divesting from South Africa and co-founded Masjid Al-Huda, which has grown to become the New Brunswick Islamic Center. In addition to Masjid Al-Huda, he has co-founded and served as imam for two other masajid. He also co-founded the Tri-State Muslim Education Initiative, the Connecticut Muslim Coordinating Committee, United for Change, as well as Zaytuna College. He served as the Muslim chaplain at Yale University from 2002 to 2003. From 1994 until 2001, he studied Islam and Arabic in Syria, while briefly in Morocco. In 2003, Imam Zaid moved to Hayward, California, to serve as a scholar in residence and lecturer at Zaytuna Institute, where he taught Arabic, Islamic law, history, and Islamic spirituality. Imam Zaid is a signatory to a declaration in support of the Paris Climate Agreement under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and he authored the Muslim response to Pope Francis's encyclical on climate change. In 2016, Imam Zaid had the immense honor of leading the funeral prayer for the late boxing champion and humanitarian icon, Muhammad Ali. While continuing his work at Zaytuna College, he currently serves as the Amir for the Muslim Alliance in North America, or MANA. He has authored 4 books and is an essayist writing on a wide variety of topics. With that said, we want to welcome our brother Imam Zaid Shakir to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. Welcome, my brother. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I apologize to the audience. The delay is owing to me, not to El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. So please, I apologize for that. Barakallahu fikum. Allah bless everyone who's viewing, and we look forward to the conversation.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for being with us today, my brother. We have been looking forward to this conversation with a great deal of anxiousness, mashallah. I want to jump right in, brother, and begin with the first alphabet, the first letter, I should say, the first letter in the alphabet, A. You are someone who knew a very committed sister of ours by the name of Afia Siddiqui. Just a week ago, we had a conversation with Imam Abdullah Farouk of Masjid Alhamdulillah in Boston, Massachusetts, and the whole program was on Afia. Today's program is going to be on a number of subjects with you, but we wanted to start out with Afia because you knew her as well. She is a political prisoner now in her going into her 18th year of wrongful imprisonment. And given the fact that the state that the United States of America is in at present is one that has brought a significant amount of long overdue focus on the criminal justice apparatus in this country, beginning with policing and ending with the whole issue of what takes place within the judiciary and imprisonment, penal institutions. I think this is a very good place for us to start. What can you share with our viewing audience about the Afia Siddiqui that you knew, Imam Zaid?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, wassalat wassalam ala sayyidil mursaleen, sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Yes, we knew Sister Afia in the context of Dawah primarily. We were in Connecticut. She was in Massachusetts at, I believe, Brandeis, and then the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a very brilliant young lady who was passionately committed to calling people to Islam. So we remember her at various programs. You remember her through her efforts to extend the invitation of Islam to people. We remember her passionate for da'wah, for sharing this message with humanity, particularly the people, and as I said, in the New England area. Those are the states between New York City and Boston, Massachusetts, for those not familiar with that area, or the populated areas. And then there's Maine and other states that aren't as well populated. And so that's the context we knew her in. And she was a person who, as I said, was very passionate about calling people to the religion, sharing their religion with them. And that from what I knew about her and her passion and her level of education, her refinement, it makes the kind of charges levied against her seem sort of far-fetched because they're extremely out of character with the person that I knew.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall the very first time you met her or you saw her? Was it at a program, or were you introduced, like one-on-one through a third party?
I don't remember those details because, as you know, I wouldn't know that one day she would be wronged in the way she was wronged. So just passing, informally conversing, waiting to go on stage at one of these programs. That's the context I primarily knew her. And so, as I said, I would never anticipate that one day she would be caught up in such a hellacious storm of accusations and imprisonment, torture. So if I knew that, I might have been more diligent and in a better position to answer those kind of questions. But I would imagine it was undoubtedly in the context of one of the programs in the New England area.
The State of America 2020, the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter uprisings still taking place throughout the country, the Trump factor. What are your thoughts on all of this, brother? The State of America 2020. Your thoughts?
Well, I think America has always been a country of contradictions. It's always from the outset. It's always been a country where there's been tremendous violence or threats or harbingers of violence. It's always been a place of tremendous promise, and that's one of the contradictions, that there's pain on the one side, especially particularly for Native people and for African folks, whether slaves or citizens subsequently, and for poor whites. I mean, there's all the way around. There's been a lot of pain, but there's been a lot of promise. You've had people having the opportunity to better themselves. You've had people who, despite the many, many obstacles, have been very successful both nationally and internationally. The likes of, you mentioned Muhammad Ali or many, many others. And so I think the current time reflects those contradictions. On the one hand, you see in some quarters, it's not universal, a very resurgent and repugnant white nationalism. On the other hand, you see probably record numbers of white folks opposing that. If you look at the marches and demonstrations of the late 60s led by Dr. King and others, they were overwhelmingly African American. If you look at the marches and that you alluded to and the current moment, many of them are overwhelmingly European, Euro-American, and others are overwhelmingly mixed. And so you see a lot more consciousness in terms of in the Euro-American community. So, and I think that just demonstrates the contradictions at a time where you have really a noticeable upswing in what they euphemistically refer to as white nationalism. You also have, I would say, record numbers of white folks, if you will, use that term, opposing it. And you have a time of, you mentioned the virus, where really a lot of the flaws in capitalism as it manifests itself in America exposed. The severe profiteering that leads to eliminating any stockpiles, because stockpiles are inventory that can be sold for profit. So why leave it sitting on the shelf? The really precarious state of many poor folks in this country. The overwhelming majority of folks dying in this pandemic, about a quarter of the world's deaths from 4% of the world's population, overwhelmingly are poor folks and overwhelmingly African-American and Latino people whose origins can be traced to Latin America. So I think these contradictions economically, socially, racially, politically, are all being revealed at this particular juncture in American history, but it's nothing new. I think if you brought people back from the height of the Jim Crow era, they would feel that they had tremendous opportunities they did not have during the Jim Crow era, because we can go to the polls and we can vote the current regime out if people organize sufficiently. You couldn't vote during the Jim Crow era if you were in the South. Many states that were those states when Lyndon Johnson, President Lyndon Johnson, signed the Civil Rights Act, he said we just lost the South for the next 50 years. And that is an argument against those who say that the Republican Southern strategy wasn't racist, or racism isn't driving politics in the South. As some people would argue, Johnson realized, when I signed this civil rights bill to give civil rights and voting rights to African Americans, the Dixiecrat wing of the Democratic Party is going to jump ship and go to the Republicans. And the Deep South has been solidly Republican from then until now. Now, ironically, that 50 years is up. And so you see states like Georgia, South Carolina, now they're purple states. They're no longer red states. And they're states that the Democratic Party is competitive in during this election cycle. So it's nothing new, and it's been worse. We can vote now. Folks couldn't vote during the Jim Crow period. So I think that in many ways, definitely, we have a very tense situation. I think the fact of the virus and the way it's been handled or mishandled has exacerbated the tension. But in other ways, there's a lot of promise and there's a lot of opportunity. Even with all the focus on the coronavirus, all the focus on the current racial climate in the country, there usually during an election year, Muslims were holding our breaths and holding on our seats because there's so much anti-Muslim vitriol in the political climate. But you don't find that because people have more pressing concerns, particularly on the Republican side of the ledger. So even a lot of the anti-Muslim people are complaining that the fundraising's down and people aren't paying attention to them. I think so. For Muslims, it's a breath of fresh air from that perspective. So there's good, there's bad. I think that's the story of America. There's good and there's bad. And as I said, there's pain, undeniably. There's a lot of pain now. And there's also promise. And that's the moment we're in, a moment of pain and a moment of promise and a moment that's really, I think, illustrates the contradictory nature of the United States historically.
Indeed, brother. You know, your response to that question I just raised reminded me of a series that you did a few years back titled Looking Back to Look Ahead. I found that series very, very thought-provoking, very beneficial. And in fact, if it's still available with, through your organization, I strongly recommend my brothers and sisters, both Muslim and non-Muslim, to look into getting a copy of it. Because again, it's very valuable.
Yeah, we're planning to put it in writing and expand it, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
But yeah, it is available though.
Okay, one of the CDs. One of the CDs in that series dealt with Muslim political involvement, voting and what the opinion of the various opinion of the scholars were on issues such as this. Given this moment that we are in right now in America, and no doubt you're aware of much of the sometimes heated debate that goes on between Muslims. Can you share some scholarly perspective on what our position should be from what you understand based upon your studies, those of us who reside in a country like the United States of America? What should be our position?
Our position on opinion? What? Our position on what?
Engaging in the electoral system.
Yeah. One time
should we not?
We absolutely should. One time I wrote a treatise that we shouldn't, but learning and growing and maturing and understanding the situation is absolutely incumbent upon us. And there's Ibn Taymiyyah has a fatwa on this issue that if Muslims as a minority are in a situation where we have an opportunity to do something that will benefit the community, then it's wajib for us to do it. And I think we should expand that to benefit humanity. And I think a lot of times we as Muslims will look at our situation as a minority and then look at the classical fiqh books and think that the situation that the ulama were talking about in those books is applicable to us. But the ulama who were writing the classical books, so and that's any time before the last 150 years, they could not conceive of a situation. So they were in a sectarian world, and in that sectarian world, Muslims in Christian lands have very restricted rights, and Christians in Muslim land, their rights were somewhat restricted. And they couldn't envision a world where a Muslim, a Christian, and atheist would have equal rights as citizens. And so that's something they don't even discuss from a political perspective in those books. This is a novel situation. And so, as Muslims in Western democracies, we have the opportunity, in some of them, we have an opportunity to raise our voices. We have an opportunity to petition the state to advance our interests. And it's wajib upon us to do that. Now, a lot of people will say, for example, I voted for Obama and he didn't do anything for our community. And this sort of reasoning illustrates a tremendous amount of immaturity in terms of how politics works in the United States. As the slogan goes, all politics are local. And so we have an opportunity at the local level to put people on the school board. And they're making decisions in terms of what sort of curriculum the overwhelming majority of Muslim children who are in public schools will be studying. If we don't have anyone on the school board because we didn't vote and we get a curriculum that we're not happy with, we, and to a certain extent, have no one to blame but ourselves. At the local level, that's where the electors who will represent us at the national political party conventions, they're chosen locally. That's where your mayors are chosen, your governors are chosen. That's where you can build power to bring pressure on the politicians at the national level. But if there's no local power and there's no local organization, just voting in the national election every 4 years and hoping that those senators and congresspeople and presidents that we elect are going to do something when there's no local basis to push them and squeeze them, is wishful thinking and it's immaturity. And so we have an opportunity to run candidates. We have an opportunity to put pressure during primaries, which are local. And many instances, a few thousand people will turn out at a primary. And so that's the level, and that's one of the reasons that the Republican Party is in a quandary right now. They lost the Congress 2 years ago because in primaries, they support people that are so extreme, and they can easily do it because the margin of victory might be 1,000, 1,500 votes in that primary election. So if you're well organized at the primary level, you can have tremendous influence. And so they elect a Tea Party person or someone now even to the right of the Tea Party who isn't viable in the open election, where you're not just appealing to the most extreme and highly motivated element of your base. And so when we neglect as Muslims to really focus on how we can build power locally and then use that local foundation as a platform to influence national level politicians, we're putting the cart before the horse. You say, I voted for this congressman, senator, or the president, and nothing happened. Nothing's going to happen until we start really building power at the local level.
Okay,
and so to summarize, is wajib to get involved, but we need a strategy. We can't just say get involved is wajib, and half of the Muslims go out and they vote for candidate A and half of them vote for candidate B. We could have all stayed home because we neutralized each other's vote. So we need a strategy to govern our involvement.
Absolutely. And this is one of the issues that I have been emphasizing quite a bit in my writings and in my limited speeches, the need for a more mature involvement on the part of our community, and this emphasis not just on the national elections every 4 years, but on the the local the politics at home, close to home, and the need also for engagement even in the national politics, Imam Zaid, beyond the election itself. Right. From this there is no question in my mind, and I'm sure that you will agree that irrespective of who wins these national elections, less than 2 weeks from now, this country is going to be in for a very severe shaking. There's going to be a lot of tumult in the wake of these national elections. It's going to be very important for us, for clear-minded citizens of every persuasion to think about what can be done, what should be done after November 3rd, in order to in order to mitigate some of the shock and the potential for violence, not just verbal violence, but actual physical violence that will probably unfold in different parts of the country
Well,
because
it's
of
unfolding now.
yeah.
I
So
mean, you
yeah,
see a lot
yeah,
of the demonstrations where some people perceive that, oh, these are left-wing fanatics, and so the right-wing fanatics come out and are running people over in cars, shooting people with
yeah,
crossbows at
yeah.
night, even shooting people with firearms and live ammunition. And so that violence is happening now, but definitely there's an opportunity. There's the chance for it to be exponentially more dangerous and more deadly if, as you say, cooler heads don't prevail, and we begin to really engage in messaging that encourages cooler heads as opposed to encouraging hotter heads.
And organizing for more substantive institutional change. I had a conversation not long ago with Sheikh Abdullah Hakim Quick, and alhamdulillah, through the course of our discussion, he referenced this pandemic and everything that has emanated from it as an opportunity for a reset. As an opportunity for a reset, and I wholeheartedly agreed with him that this is an opportunity for a much needed reset on so many levels. On the individual level, on the familial level, on the community level close to home, and on the national level. This is an opportunity for a reset. It's also an opportunity for Muslims.
That's a
If we,
tremendous opportunity.
because we have, as you are well aware, an ideology that emphasizes the common thread that binds us together as one humanity. So
Yeah,
we're in a unique position. What
it's
kind
not
of
just
advice would
that.
you give? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, thank you for bringing that up. That's a very, very important point that people oftentimes neglect. I think Muslims, if you look at our situation, there's racial strife and division. What did Malcolm X say from Mecca? He said that maybe if America would study Islam and people would consider Islam, they can work through this race problem. Because I
Yeah.
see here in Mecca how Islam has brought all of these people who in America would be considered white and these in America black, but
Mhm.
they're all in a situation of brotherhood. And some people think Malcolm, oh, he really didn't know the Muslim. Malcolm was a brilliant student of societies. Malcolm knew
Yeah.
exactly what he was talking about. But if you don't believe Malcolm, our greatest arguably our greatest historian of the 20th century, Arnold Toynbee, in his essay on Islam, Islam and the West, he says that Islam can offer two things, and this is relevant for the situation we're in with the virus and the economic meltdown to Western society: a solution to the problem of alcohol and by extension drugs and addiction, and a solution to the race problem. And then Toynbee, very insightfully, he identifies the race problem. He says it's a spiritual problem. And
Mm.
so, who better to bring a solution to a spiritual problem than a spiritual community? like the Muslims. Now, the alcohol problem, alcoholism, drug addiction is at record amounts because people are there's so much anxiety, there's so much depression, suicide is off the chart here in our country. And so we can offer people a way to look at reality and deal with reality, to process difficulty, struggle. يا عجبا لأمر المؤمن إن أمره كله له خير وليس ذلك لأحد إلا للمؤمن. The believer's affair is amazing, and that's only for the believer. If some good befalls them, they thank Allah, and that's best for them. And if some affliction befalls them, they patiently work through it, and that's best for them. And so we have a methodology that allows us to deal with traumatic situations. ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب. Does not the remembrance of Allah bring tranquility to the heart? And so we have a spiritual program. We have a social program that breaks down these divisions that are put up between us as people. We have a political program. And so this is a tremendous opportunity for Muslims to begin to articulate some of the solutions we have to these problems. The problem of suicide. We know, number one, we have a program, an anti-despair program. As Yaqub says to his sons when he sends them back to Egypt to look for Yusuf, ولا تيأسوا من روح الله إنه لا ييأس من روح الله إلا القوم الكافرون. Only a disbelieving people despair of Allah's mercy. So we're not given to despair during these times. We're not given to suicide. We know is haram. But also when we're not despairing, the impetus that might push even a believer towards suicide, it just isn't there. And these are all things we can share with our societies. And believe me, I had a talk with a non-Muslim lady last night, and it kind of inadvertently, someone called because they were talking to her and she had a question they couldn't answer. But she was very much interested in what Islam had to say about a lot of the current things that are befalling us. So I think the reset is very well phrased, but we shouldn't underestimate the difficulty and the seriousness of the task. It's going to take a lot of resources to really get that message out to people. It's going to take a lot of coordination to marshal the resources that are necessary to reach a whole lot of people, and then to deal with people. Everyone says, oh, I love Islam. And then what infrastructure do we have in place to really process and educate and orient those people in a positive way so they don't have PSSS, post-shahada shock syndrome. Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah, and then 2 weeks later, did I do the right thing? And so we have to put a lot of programs in place, a lot of infrastructure in place, a lot of educational resources, and that's going to take a lot of money, but most importantly, it's going to take a lot of cooperation and coordination and collective work.
Mm-hmm. Imam Zaid, these Black Lives Matter uprisings and you know, the long overdue emphasis and pressure being felt by police departments and the way that policing has been done in this country, long overdue pressure and accountability has resulted from these demonstrations that have taken place that you have correctly noted have been very, very mixed, very multiracial, using that terminology in their makeup. I mean, this is a moment in time that I have not witnessed before in my lifetime. What is your opinion, first of all, of this Black Lives Matter movement, and what do you expect to come out of all of this attention and pressure? And what role should Muslims be playing in this? I'm sure you're aware, there's even some strong differences of opinion there as well. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that you want me to be honest.
Yes, I want you to be. I want you to be honest, Shakir.
All right, so you deal with the consequences. No, I'm just kidding. But honestly, that's a deep question. The entire program can be devoted to that particular
That's right.
issue.
Yes, it is.
I think we have, as Muslims, we have to be very judicious and very thoughtful in how we approach everything. And they say it's a play on words. They say mu'min kayis wa fatin wala kisul qutin. So the same structure of the words before they had the dots. Could you could say al mu'min, the believer. Kayis is as wise, wa fatin, and discerning, wala, and not kisul qutin. So kayis can be kis and fatin can be qutin. And so the Muslim, the believer, is wise and discerning and not a bag of cotton. So so in all things we have to be wise and discerning. I think definitely it's a unique moment that we're in. And the issue, the way it's framed, I think we have to be wise in how we negotiate the framing of the issue. I think all of us who are members of the African American community in this country, in the United States, we support Black lives. That's unequivocal. We support our family, our children. We support our neighbors. We support the historical struggle of our people that we find ourselves involved in. And so we all support Black lives. But when it's framed as Black Lives Matter, I think we have to parse out that if Black Lives Matter means supporting efforts to encourage more justice in our community, if Black Lives Matter means organizing elements in our community that have historically been dormant, if Black Lives Matter means shining light on a lot of the injustices, particularly that occur around policing in many of our communities, then we would say we support Black Lives Matter. But as a Muslim, if Black Lives matters means supporting the LGBTQ plus agenda, not knowing where that social experiment would mean, if Black Lives Matter means disrupting the nuclear family as is formerly on their website, if Black Lives Matter means joining the soda war that's been waged on Black males by all other alternative non-mainstream identity movements to highlight their position, if Black Lives Matter means, as also it might still be on their website, eradicating patriarchal heterosexual normalcy and marginalizing that, I think we have to be very careful, because a lot of those things involve kufr, to be perfectly blunt as a Muslim. When you say like gender fluidity is the true way to conceptualize gender, and that the male-female binary involves a false, unrealistic representation of reality, that's a very dangerous statement, because Allah says, يعني اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء. That's the nuclear family, and that's the gender binary. And so do you, in the name of gender fluidity, reject that? These are very tricky theological issues that I think Muslims should be very careful in terms of, do we sign on to that? So yes, all the former things we mentioned, if that's what it means, then we can say I'm down with that. But if it means the latter, we have to start to question it. If it becomes a wedge, And so, just being perfectly honest, we have to identify who's behind this whole movement. And why do I say that? Definitely the former goals I mentioned, shining light on injustice, mobilizing people to address some historical wrongs and issues. That's very positive and that's very good. But if every 4 years, as we saw in 2016 and now in 2020, we're going to have some people in the background manipulating people to widen these divides between people and to make the polarization between the various racial and ethnic groups so severe that you can't bridge it. And this only accelerates every election cycle. Then I think that's a very dangerous development. And so, who is behind this? You know, is it a surrogate for the Democratic Party, or is it something that's non-systemic in terms of its political goals and objectives? How is it being used? Is it being used to bring people together? Islam is tawheed. We bring things together towards a unified oneness. That's in society, and that's in terms, that's theology, but that's also society. Our society is takfir, tearing things apart. And so the underlying philosophy that informs the Black Lives Matter philosophically, I'm not saying politically, philosophically, is takfir, because it's based on the idea of deconstruction. And deconstruction is saying that modernity either neglected some things, like the complete dismantling of all religion and not just the secularizing of the world, or it didn't go far enough in some areas. And so if we're looking at a movement that said it didn't go far enough in terms of eliminating religion as a socio-political consideration, and so you see there's an implicit war between Black Lives Matter and the Black church. And I'm not saying that to say take a side. I'm just saying, if that war that's going on is designed to eliminate the historical influence of the church, and then all of our activism becomes secular, and it's not infused with the kind of spiritual foundation that was very prevalent in the movement led by Dr. King, and that was the Southern Christian Leadership Council and other organizations that had a spiritual foundation. If it's designed to eliminate that altogether, it should give Muslim pause. So there's a lot of considerations that I think there are things that we can say 100% unequivocally that we would support. And there are other things that I think we would be foolish to say, I need to look into this deeper. So it's not black and white, as they say. There's a lot of gray in there.
Yes, indeed. And I certainly wish we had more time, brother, to explore this. Perhaps at a later date, inshallah ta'ala, we can come back and just have a conversation on this issue alone, so that, you know, we can give much needed guidance to our young brothers and sisters who want to do something, who want to invest their time and energy in what they consider to be substantive avenues for change, but be able to do so in a way that will not compromise them, will not, especially for Muslims, not compromise their principles and beliefs, and yet enable them to be an effective conduit for you know, that much needed change that needs to be brought here to America. Inshallah ta'ala, we can go into that more later. We have a few minutes left, Aki. Actually, we're at the end of the program, but since we got off to a late start, we're just going to extend this a bit, inshallah ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair.
I want to end this conversation with a discussion on manna. You have recently assumed the position of Amir of the Muslim Alliance in North America. As you are well aware, this is an organization that created, a few years back when it first, came onto the scene, a tremendous amount of excitement, especially
Mm.
within the ranks of the African American community. There were a number of conferences and forums that were held. All of them that I attended were very successful, both in terms of attendance, in terms of organization. I mean, just the impact. It was very, very impressive. And then all of a sudden, subhanAllah, it's like manna took a nosedive. And it disappointed. It disappointed a lot of Muslims, especially African American Muslims. Now that you have assumed the position of Amir of the organization, and it appears to be, reasserting itself, what
Slowly.
can we slowly? What can we expect? What do you envision for this organization going forward, inshallah ta'ala?
That's an excellent question. We're trying to come back on the scene slowly, incrementally, so we can manage expectations. Even politically, and in political science, there's what is referred to as a revolution of rising expectations. And when expectations become so great, and then the failure to meet those expectations is great, you can have really long-term damage to a movement, to people, and you allude to that.
Yeah.
May Allah Ta'ala bless you and bless your work. So I think what we can expect is an organization that will systematically build itself up to be a place where Muslims primarily, but not exclusively, but primarily African American Muslims can come together to amplify each other's voice, can benefit in their religion in terms of learning things that will help them in their religion in ways that might not ordinarily be available through other venues and other fora, and also to cultivate the love, brotherhood, and sisterhood that I think you alluded to was present in those early years of Manna. Because if we don't have that, we don't have anything. Our community, and this is another danger that I think the misunderstanding the Black Lives Matter situation, and I don't want to come off negative on the movement nor dismiss the tremendous good that has come out of it, but one of the things that I think is happening, it becomes very easy when we're dealing with strictly secular and particularly left-wing atheistic philosophies. It becomes easy to hate each other, and it becomes easy for us to lose the value of our brotherhood and sisterhood over secondary issues, and that's very dangerous. Did you go out to the demonstration or not? And if you didn't, you're not woke. And if you're not woke, I should counsel you. These. Did you adopt a young African American child and give that child an opportunity to grow up in the context of a family, as opposed to in the context of an institution, which will generally destine that child to spend the rest of their lives in the institution, from the orphanage to the prison? Did you marry an African American sister when you had a choice? Did you commit yourself to your children to make sure that you're going to be there, knowing that children growing up in a two-parent household have tremendously more positive outcomes than those who don't? And I grew up in a single-family household, one mother, 7 children. So I'm not saying you can't overcome, but you look at educational attainment, you look at the wealth gap, you look at likelihoods of ending up in incarceration, are far, far greater and a single family home. So have those are the things that we need to be holding each other to account for, not whether we went to the demonstration or not, because changing societies takes more than events and shows. I'll give you an example. It's going to be controversial, and so you guys can blow up El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan's social media. But I'll give you an example. The Democratic Party engaged in a lot of show. They put on kente cloths and took a knee during these protests and everything. But the other day, when the moderator, African American sister, may Allah bless her, she was the best moderator of any of these so-called debates, hands down. She pushed the candidate, she followed up, she did a brilliant job. When she asked Donald Trump, what have you done for the African American community? What have you done? He said prison reform. He said historical help for historical black universities and colleges. He listed a number of things. I'm not saying vote for Trump. I'm not voting for Trump. I'm saying he listed a number of concrete things that he has done. Joe Biden was silent. He was silent. And so what I'm saying is you could engage in a lot of show and a lot of theater and political theater. But the problems that we're dealing with, they're going to require concrete solutions. And those concrete solutions are going to it's going to involve our brotherhood and sisterhood that's predicated on the love that exists between us. مثل المؤمنين في تودهم وتراحمهم وتعاطفهم مثل الجسد. The likeness of the believers in their mutual love, the mutual mercy, and the mutual emotional connection between them is like a single body. And so when we start hating each other, we start dismissing each other, we start encouraging people to have a negative opinion towards each other on issues that are secondary or tertiary in terms of what it's going to take to affect positive change in our community, that's a very, very dangerous sign. And we have to be very, very careful that we don't go down that route. That I disagree with you, but you're still my brother or sister in Islam, and there's still love between us. And if I disagree with you on A, come on, let's work together on B. We'll just leave A on the side. But if we say no, because I can't work with you or I can't respect what you do on A, then B, C, D, and E are off the table. That's not an Islamic approach to things. And I pray that I'm not saying that's our reality, but you see it leaning in those directions. And so may Allah give us the wisdom to understand we're going to differ. And we're going to have different approaches on different things, but there's a whole lot that we're going to agree on. And we can't allow what we differ on to prevent us, especially when there's secondary things. We're not differing on primary thawabit, as they say, things that are known to be absolutely essential aspects of our religion and our theology. Secondary things.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to really maintain that love and brotherhood and the balance, and then accepting, like, okay, I think this brother is way off the mark on this sister is way off the mark on that, but he or she actually makes sense on these other points. So I'm just going to leave that to the side and focus on these things where we can work towards getting that critical mass that we need to really affect some change in our societies.
Alhamdulillah. Any final thought?
I just finally would say, thank you for the opportunity, and may Allah reward you on your work and the work that you do. That obviously you're connecting through South Africa is having international impact. We pray that Allah gives you more tawfiq, and we pray that we can no matter what our situation, we can be Muslims. And we can approach and deal with each other as Muslims, as brothers and sisters who at the end of the day are working towards common goals, and to maintain the spirit of nasiha, sincere advice, constructive criticism, as opposed to taking every opportunity to tear each other down, to dismiss each other, to close the doors to each other. These are times that we need to be opening the doors to each other. Need to be assisting each other. We need to give sincere advice because, but we have to. This is the final advice I'll give. We have to respect our Muslim teachings concerning those things that preserve our brotherhood and sisterhood, because we're getting into an era. They're going to be able. They can now, but they're perfecting it to make what I'm doing right now. They take my image, take my voice, computer analyze it, reproduce it, and I'm giving a speech that's going to make you guys really mad. And so if we can't say, whoa, that sounds out of character, let me call the brother. Well, let me call El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. He's in touch with Imam Zaid. Can you ask him, did you actually say this or that? But if we just jump to conclusion, and it's very, I encourage everyone, watch this documentary, Social Dilemma. And it talks about the pernicious impact social media is having. There's positive. This program is a positive, but there's a lot of negative. And one of the negative things they found, false news and lies spread 6 times faster than the truth on social media. And so when they blast out that thing that I didn't even say, I'm using myself as an example, that I didn't even say, they blast out that video clip that I didn't even do. If the assumption is guilty before even inquiring to find out the truth, we're in for some long days, and it's going to be absolutely impossible for us to work together. It's going to be absolutely impossible, because our emotions are going to be torn in so many. A'udhu billah. And then once it's straightened out 2 or 3 days later, oh man, that was a fake video that was put together by this group. We tracked them down. They're operating from this server. But the emotional damage is done.
Yeah.
And so those principles of verifying, those principles of offering nasiha, those principles of cultivating mutual love and respect between us, if that's not at the foundation of our work, as we get deeper and deeper into these areas of technological fabrication and manipulation, it's going to be impossible to work together. Absolutely. So may Allah give us tawfiq in that regard. Ameen. Watch this Social Dilemma, and keep watching Salam Media, and tune in whenever Brother Saalakhan is on. You turn in, because you're going to learn something good, and we're not going to say anything else. La nuzaki ala Allahi ahada.
Thank you, Imam Zaid. Very sage nasiha that we ended with. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for it. It reminded me of what I refer to as the opportunities for COINTELPRO on steroids in the 21st century.
No, absolutely. Look how cool that stuff was, and the damage that it did. People getting killed, people getting torn from each other, organizations getting undermined, and we're dealing with faxes and stenographic, and now we're dealing with digitally created virtual reality that becomes increasingly hard to distinguish from reality itself. And if I could end with one prophetic prayer, and I think everyone should keep this on our tongue. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'a. Ya Allah, show us the truth as the truth and bless us to follow it. Wa arina al-batilan batila warzuqna ijtinaba. And show us falsehood as falsehood and bless us to avoid it. That prayer is going to become increasingly relevant in the days, months, and years ahead. So may Allah bless us to see the truth as truth and to follow it, commit ourselves to it. And may Allah reveal falsehood to us as falsehood and bless us to avoid it. And it's only through His grace and His power that we'll be able to do so, because it's getting beyond our individual capacities.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much, Imam Zaid Shakir.
And I apologize for the lateness. It was my fault. I apologize.
You more than made up for it, my brother. Alhamdulillah. This was an excellent program. I am so glad that we were able to have this conversation. I thank our brothers and sisters out there in South Africa, in the United States, and other parts of the world who were able to tune in live. Please share this within your various social media platforms, and so that more folks can benefit from this conversation that took place. We'll conclude as I normally do with Surah Al-Asr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana lafi kusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati. Wattawassaw bil haqq. Wattawassaw bis sabr. Thank you. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
barakatuh.